Hello everyone, I am Isha, and today I'll be starting our presentation on the impact of signal transition time on path delay computation. This work is part of our digital VLSI course and it explores how the transition time of a signal, that is, how fast or slow a signal rises or falls, can significantly influence both gate delay and overall path delay in digital circuits. I'll begin with the introduction and fundamental concepts, and then my teammates Naseem and Ria will take over later in the presentation to cover the remaining sections. Here is a quick overview of what we will be covering. I'll begin with the introduction followed by dynamic delay effects. We will then discuss input proximity effects, the extended critical path method, and context based delay modeling. After that, we will move on to the results and finally the conclusion. As I mentioned, Naseem and Ria will continue the presentation after my part and explain the later sections in detail. Let me begin with motivation behind this work. Timing analysis is a crucial part of digital circuit design because it checks whether signals propagate within the required time constraints. However, traditional static timing analysis assumes that gate delays are constant, which is not always true in practice. In reality, gate delay depends on the input transition time, that is, how slowly or quickly the input voltage changes. According to the paper we studied, a gate's delay can vary by 30 to 45% depending solely on the input slope. This means that ignoring transition time can lead to incorrect path delay predictions, especially for long paths. So, the goal of this work is to improve timing analysis by incorporating dynamic, slope dependent delay behavior instead of relying only on static delay models. On this slide, we focus on how gate delay changes with input transition time. Gate delay is measured between predefined voltage thresholds such as 10 to 90% or 30 to 70% points when the input switches slowly. The transition inside the gate take longer to turn on or off, which increases the propagation delay. From the simulation results, we observe two important properties. Gate delay increases monotonically as the input transition time increases, so a slower input always means a longer delay. The sensitivity of delay to transition time is less than 1, which means the effective effect of a slow slope becomes smaller as the signal passes through more logic stages. These two properties are foundational because they explain why slope effects matter a lot at the start of a path but gradually fade as the signal moves deeper into the circuit. This slide shows how both delay and sensitivity vary with input transition time. As the input slope becomes slower, the delay increases, but the rate of increase decreases. As indicated by the sensitive curves, sensitivity values less than 1 mean that any delay variation introduced by slow input transitions will attenuate rapidly over successive stages. For example, a large variation at the first gate might reduce to almost negligible levels after just two or three logic stages. This observation becomes extremely important later when we discuss methods like context based delay modeling, because it explains why only the first few stages significantly influence slope dependent timing behavior. After this, Ria will continue with the next section on input proximity effects.
So in this slide now we will talk about input proximity effects. So for input proximity effect, consider a multi-input gate like a NOR gate, where two inputs are switching at almost the same time. In that situation, the internal devices of the gate share currents in a more complex way. The paper shows that when input transitions overlap in time, the effective delay of the gate can change by up to 40%. However, modeling this accurately inside a timing tool becomes complicated because we need to know exact relative timings of multiple input and not just one. For this reason, the paper does not fully include proximity effect in their main timing model. Instead, it is only focused on single input change conditions which are easier to integrate. So, In this slide, I will explain extended critical path method. In standard critical path method used by STA tools, we typically propagate only arrival times through the timing graph. Each gate contributes a fixed delay and we compute the latest arrival time at each node. In the extended critical path method proposed in this paper, we propagate two quantities instead of just one, arrival time as well as transition time. For an output node, the equations are A out is maximum of arrival time plus delay due to transition time. Here, K is the input that determines the critical transition. The authors also compared front end and back end delay placement in the paper. In front end placement, delays are associated with each input before combining. In backend placement, delay is lumped at the output after combining. So it can be understood that the front end delay modeling is more accurate because it respects per input delay behavior. For analysis, we have used context based modeling instead of extended critical path method. While extended critical path method proposed is more accurate, it requires modifying existing timing analyzers to handle transition times. To avoid this, the paper proposed context based delay modeling as a more practical alternative. The key idea is based on what we saw in earlier slides that sensitivity is less than 1. So the impact of input transition time fades quickly as we pass through more grids. Therefore, instead of tracking transition time through the whole circuit, we only look at a small neighborhood. So, for looking at the small neighborhood, we define the context. So here, as it can be seen in the algorithm level, there is a number of combinational gate network denoted by N and context levels denoted by C. This C denotes that till how much level we want to compute the effect of transition time, after which its effect will get faded away.
So here in the slide, there is a comparison of all four delay prediction models against SPICE, which we treat as the reference. The first thing we see is that the static fixed delay model performs the worst because it can easily underestimate path delay by almost 40%. Now, once we add even a small amount of local context, the accuracy improves dramatically. As you can see, the one context model brings the error down to around 5%, and the two context model gets extremely close to SPICE within 1 to 2%. Whereas the extended critical path method, which explicitly tracks both arrival time and transition time to the network, delivers the best accuracy under 1% error, essentially matching the splice. Therefore, the key message here is that capturing input slope effects locally gives you the most of the benefit without needing heavily full-time domain simulations. So now coming to the strength and the limitation. On the strength side, we have seen that the traditional static delay models are not sufficient as they can miss important effects related to the input transition time. But at the same time, there are also a few important limitations to keep in mind. First of all, these experiments were done on the gallium arsenide direct coupled FET logic technology, which is older and very different from today's deep submicron CMOS transistors. So the behavior they observed and the exact delay numbers may not directly match what we would see in this modern silicon. Secondly, the study didn't include the interconnect delays. In topologies, wiring delay can sometimes dominate gate delay, so ignoring it limits how we directly we can apply the results to real chips. And finally, input proximity effects are not been considered. That is the cases where multiple inputs switch close together in time, even though these can affect significant delay. So now to wrap up, the overall conclusion that we can have is very straightforward. That is the input transition time has a strong impact on both the gate delay and the path delay, but the sensitivity is less than 1, which means the effect naturally gets smaller and smaller as we move deeper into the farm. Because of this modeling, just one or two levels of context is enough to capture almost all the slope related delay variations, giving near spice accuracy at a fraction of the cost. These techniques have the potential to make our timing libraries and static timing analysis much more accurate without adding significant overhead to the design. Thank you.